Hello and welcome to today's episode of Her Version. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of struggle to triumph, a platform that allows individuals to tell their truth in order to inspire and uplift others. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you follow, like, and share. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. Let's jump right in. Hello, and thank you for joining us today for this episode of Her Version. The Her Version platform is built on storytelling and the understanding that many times our greatest learning experiences come from learning from other people's stories. Today, I am speaking with an amazing woman named Kat. Kat remembers vividly hiding from bombshelling in her family's basement with no radio and no TV when she was 10 years old. She had to abruptly leave school when a terrible civil war erupted in Lebanon. She remembers her dad turning to alcohol for solace before her parents separated and how much she yearned to escape her life. Over the past few decades, she was able to leave that situation, travel, and undergo some intensive work to heal the trauma caused by her father. Kat is here today to talk about rising above our current situation and growing into a life that we are proud of despite our past. Welcome, Kat. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me, Sabrina. I'm doing great. Yourself?
Yes. Thank you. And you just informed me, which I feel horrible considering I have an all-female platform, that today is what?
International Women's Day, March 8th.
Yes. What a day to be chatting.
I know. I feel it's very symbolic and powerful.
Yes. I love that. So how has your day been? How's your Tuesday?
It's great. It's exciting. I've been checking social media and making sure I shout out all the amazing women who have been so supportive in my life and on my journey. And I think what's really symbolic about this day is that we just recognize the strength in women out there and how much they do and how much they work to really build the fabric of society. We're very much supportive, relational beings as women, and we were always looking to build and grow and put together things.
100%. I agree. Yeah, we're constantly building emotionally, physically, mentally, which is all good. We've come a long, long way. Even just from, my grandmother's generation to my mother's generation, the gaps emotionally and mentally between myself and even just two generations back is amazing. And I'm so grateful to be living in the age that I'm in, and the education and the information that we have at our fingertips.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And our ability to build on what the past generation has given us and to grow our self-awareness and that of our children in the next generation.
Yes. I agree. That was actually one of the issues with myself as far as creating a platform was for the generations to come. It's kind of like if, some of us have to kind of stand up and start speaking loudly the information that we're aware of in order to kind of shake, the generations to come and kind of get them to see things a little bit differently.
Yeah, and to model for them what it means to speak up, what it means to speak out, what it means to stand in our power. And that's the important part because, maybe we will be doing things that are shaking up our present, but for our children, it might be, we might sound like old people, right? Like my grandmother was very avant-garde in her time, but now I look back and I'm like, yeah, but what she did is she inspired my mother, who in turn inspired me to really, go against the grain and be our own person.
100%. 100%. Well, listen, we have so much to cover with your story, and I would love to kind of just hand the mic over to you for, a little bit of time to kind of have you be able to share your journey and your story and kind of some of the things that you've gone through in your life. Would you mind stepping into that and sharing some of your past with us?
Absolutely. I know in your intro we talk about my childhood, and I'll cover that briefly because I think um, our childhood shapes who we are and what challenges we tend to face as adults, what obstacles we see as big and looming, even though they may not be there for other people. So, as a kid, I grew up in Lebanon with in a foreign family. My parents were raised abroad; they were not raised in Lebanon, and so we always had this sense of otherness growing up in Lebanese culture. And then that was compounded by the war, where we, had to kind of stick together and not really integrate into society. And then that was further compounded by my father, who had trouble coping with the entire environment and the situation. And so his coping mechanism was addiction, unfortunately. But I think what that did for us, or for me specifically, I won't speak about anyone else, is that it made the world seem like a scary place. It made it very difficult for me to reach out and talk to people and connect and assert my presence or feel seen and heard. And so the result of that childhood is that my whole life has been an effort to fix that, right? Like an effort to have fun as an adult, an effort to find my voice as an adult, an effort to connect socially with people and in community as an adult, an effort to be seen and heard and recognized, and also to see my own value. Because when you're in survival mode, you're not really busy thinking about, oh, is my child, feeling enough love, or is my child feeling seen or heard enough, right? Like we were literally hiding in the basement. We had sacks of sand that my brothers and my dad would stack outside so that the shrapnel wouldn't come into our house.
Wow.
I still remember very vividly when there was a ceasefire, we'd go out into the garden and we would pick shrapnel from the garden. We would look at the shapes of the bits of, exploded bombs. And it doesn't seem shocking to me because that was my normal, but I know it's shocking to other people.
Yeah.
But like I said, the impact of growing up like that is something that's a lifelong effort to change and to establish a different kind of a normal for myself.
Definitely. Do you, now looking back, do you feel as if there had to be some fear? Was there fear, first of all?
I'm pretty sure there was. I mean, I was 10 at the peak, at the worst of it, and I'm pretty sure I was scared. I'm trying to remember. I think when you have traumatic experiences like that, you disconnect emotionally, honestly. And the first time I spoke to a therapist about this experience and he used the word trauma, I was taken aback. I was like, was that traumatizing? That wasn't traumatizing. Was that trauma? Is that really trauma? Like, I had never categorized that experience as traumatic because that was just what it was. And so I think I was in my early 30s the first time a therapist said that to me. And so I believe I completely disassociated from myself or what I felt to protect myself.
Yeah. So I always find this so interesting. I hear so many women who come on this podcast talk about trauma and the meaning of trauma and the trauma in accordance to what they've been through their journey. And it's interesting how so many of us don't view it as trauma. So I want to ask, what I 100% understand where you're coming from, but what is trauma to you? So you didn't view that as trauma. What is trauma?
Now as an adult, I look back and I always think trauma is something worse than where I was, right? Like it's always something just a little bit worse. It's maybe not having a home or a shelter to hide in and being exposed, or knowing somebody, having a sibling who, you know, was a victim of the war, or it always feels like trauma is just that one or two places worse than where I am.
It's interesting, huh?
Yeah. And I did need a lot of help from therapy and from mind body skills groups to recognize that it was trauma, to recognize the impact it had emotionally and psychologically.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting just hearing your story because, now looking at my story, which is not as bad as your story, I have also endured trauma. But my trauma, when I view a definition of trauma, it would be similar to what you endured. So for me, it's like, "Oh my gosh, that's traumatic over there." But then you're viewing your life cycle as the same way I'm viewing my life cycle, as it just is. It just is, and we have to learn how to survive, and I just find that so interesting how important it is as we grow and we evolve to allow ourselves to realize that there has been stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think a big part of that is the education that comes alongside of our experiences, where you do have a specialist who says this is a traumatic event. I mean, even something as small as being late to pick up your child at school, like very late, not 5 minutes, but maybe half an hour, where they feel scared. They're wondering, where's mom or dad, you
Yeah.
know? Did something happen to them? That is traumatic,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Interesting.
I recently got very deeply into mind body skills, which are very focused on healing trauma. So I've become a mind body skills practitioner. I run mind body skills groups. And as a result of these groups that I'm running, now I'm starting to realize how all of us have endured some sort of trauma,
Mhm.
right? Like a trauma really is a harsh experience that interrupts the normal process of a life.
Yeah.
So we've all endured trauma. We all need to work on healing trauma. We all need to work on better understanding who we are, better recognizing our feelings and emotions and what they mean to us, and better managing our behavior when we understand that, not reacting, but being deliberately intentional about how we choose to act as a result of the emotions we're feeling. And this needs to be part of our mainstream education alongside science and math and everything else.
Definitely. One of the difficulties that I've had that I would appreciate your opinion on is what's the difference between healing from your trauma and minimizing your trauma?
Hmm. So for a long time, I think I minimized my trauma, where I was like, it wasn't a big deal. It was my normal. I'm unaffected by it. It was really just, brushing it aside. I think the difference is, sweeping the dust to a corner versus actually vacuuming.
Got it. Yeah.
You sweep to the dust to the corner, and then every time somebody passes by, it kind of wafts back into the middle of the room. But when you heal, you're picking it up, and it doesn't mean, again, in my groups, I have participants who are like, yeah, but I worked on this. I thought I healed the trauma.
Yeah.
It's never fully healed. Every time you heal one level, you go further, right? Like you go deeper, you heal another level, and you can heal personally, and then you can heal transgenerationally as well. There is trauma that we carry that is transmitted to us through cellular memory.
Yeah.
Right? My background is science and engineering, so I very much focus on the science when I talk about these things, because I need to be convinced that I'm not, talking something woo-woo, that it's supported by science, but science supports this idea of cellular, of memories being passed on by genetics.
Yeah.
And so trauma that our grandparents have endured is passed on to us, especially as women.
Yeah.
Especially as women, because let's say my grandmother is pregnant with my mother. She endures a trauma. My mother in utero already has her eggs. I am already an egg in my mother's ovaries while she is in the womb of my grandmother. So the three of us, all three generations, are enduring that trauma that my grandmother is living through.
Wait a minute. Say that again.
It's mind-blowing, and I have the science that backs it. But let's say my grandmother is in a World War II.
Okay.
She's enduring a very traumatic experience. She has not had children yet, or she was pregnant with my mother.
Okay.
My mother in utero, in my grandmother's body, in her stomach, already has her eggs formed. There, I am already an egg.
Wow.
And so my grandmother's trauma is my mother's trauma is my trauma.
Wow. The vibrations I get that.
The memory gets into the cells, the genetics, the epigenetics, the genes that turn on as a result of that trauma are activated. And so what research has found is that if your grandparents have endured extreme trauma, you are more likely to be susceptible to stress. You're more affected by stress. You are more anxious. You're more, just because of what your grandparents endured, because of that transgenerational memory.
Since we're on this subject, I'm sure that you probably know the like mouse and cherry blossom.
Oh no, I don't recognize that.
Oh, then I don't want to bring it up because I don't know exactly how it goes, but it was something to the effect of, now I feel bad. Doesn't matter. Anyways, something with mice though. It was something with mice, and the mice, like every time they smelled cherry blossoms, like something bad would happen. Like they would do something to them, and then the next generation, like the same thing. And then what they found is like, even though the bad thing never happened anymore, those same mice, generation after generation, none of them would go near the cherry blossoms.
That's exactly it. That's the same principle.
Yes, and I feel bad that I don't remember that whole thing, but that's okay. That's part of a live podcast.
But we'll put a link somewhere.
Yes, I'll have to look that up so I remember it correctly next time. Considering where you are and the journey that you've been through and all of the ups and downs, what would you consider to be your biggest failure? And what did you learn from that experience?
Honestly, I would say my biggest failure was not believing in myself sooner. I've put myself down so often. I opted out of experiences. I always thought other people were better, other people could do it better. I always thought there was some it to get done, right? Like I really believe my biggest failure is not believing in myself more sooner.
Yeah. What do you think is the correct age for that?
I don't know. I have 3 kids. I have 2 girls and a boy. My daughters are 7 and 11. My son is 10. And I am a very intentional parent, because as a coach and somebody who has spent many, many years introspecting into what makes me me and how I can be a better version of myself, I'm very aware of how the things I say and do and the parent I am impacts my children.
Yeah.
And so I work very hard at building that self-confidence in my children on a daily basis with the smallest things. They want to cook, I let them cook. I give them responsibility. I let them own the consequences. And I always say, like, parenting is an exercise in self-control.
Yeah.
Because they don't mind making the messes, breaking things, spilling things, learning from their experiences. We mind as parents, right?
Yes.
We are carrying all of our garbage with us and trying to hand it over to them and be like, don't break the plates. We don't have more than a dozen plates. And then we're like, well, we can afford plates. So
yeah.
Break the plate. It's fine. So I always am so aware that good parenting is just being able to just quiet myself and let them be kids.
Yeah. I just did a TikTok on this. One of the things that I do with moms, especially who are struggling with something similar to what you're talking about, is I have an exercise that I have them do where it doesn't matter how old your child is, obviously appropriate, like at least, 4 or 5 years old. But I tell them to have their child bake a cake from scratch, and they're not allowed to touch anything or say anything negative. They have to literally get the ingredients, age appropriate, right? But ingredients, or if they can read, then they do nothing. But they have to sit there and watch. So she has to sit and she has to watch them bake a cake, but with no negativity and with no touching. So anything that happens that's not like, within the realm of what we deem is appropriate, it has to be rewarded with a good job. They spilled a little bit, they cracked an egg, they broke an egg, the flour half got on the counter, half. Good job. Good job. How do we fix that? How do we adapt? And then all the way through till cooking it, all the way through till putting the frosting on it and it being uneven, and then pressing the spatula too hard in and leaving like a big gaping hole in it, and just allowing them to not only make the mistake, but to observe you watching them make a mistake and how you are approaching, their missteps. And it's very rewarding. The feedback is great.
I'll bet, for both the parent and the child, right? The child feels empowered and the parent is recognizing what triggers them.
Yeah, definitely. When did you get into personal growth? When did that kind of come into your world?
So I've been journaling since I was 14, 15 for many reasons. First, I needed an outlet, then I needed to express anger. But personal growth really kicked in when I was 22. I thought I had done all of the right things. I went to college. I got my master's degree from MIT. I was in America. I had moved by then. I moved from Lebanon to the US when I was 17. So I took 21 credits, got great grades, got into MIT, did my master's, got a job. And there I was sitting there with my job, making money, thinking, here I was, I've done it. Like
Yeah.
it was.
Yeah.
And I was profoundly unhappy.
Wow.
And at the same time, I did a pap smear, and I had an abnormal precancerous cells. And then I was playing soccer and I injured my knee. And then I found myself sitting in winter in Cape Cod with this diagnosis and with an injured knee and with myself for company. And I realized how profoundly unhappy I was with who I was, with what I was doing, with where I was, with what life was about for me. And that was the trigger. That was the really huge starting point, where I bought the book that completely made me never turn back, which is Christiane Northrup's Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom. It's a book like this thick, and it is phenomenal. She's a medical doctor, but she's very connected spiritually and emotionally and scientifically, which are, for me, I need all three. And the things I discovered there about being a woman and about introspection and how your health is impacted by your psychological state, all of that just pushed me into a complete different direction. I quit my job. I had a green card in the US. I left it. I moved to Guatemala for 2 months. I was working as an engineer in the US. I moved there. I enrolled for Spanish classes. I was teaching at an orphanage. I started learning salsa. I just took a 2-month sabbatical to ask myself the really hard questions of, who do I want to be?
Yeah.
I had never taken the time to do that. And I guess it's young, but at the time I was like, I thought I have it all. Why am I so unhappy?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so interesting, the perspective now looking back, because you're kind of on both ends of the spectrum. On one end, you endured, in my eyes, some pretty traumatic events that you're viewing as not really that traumatic. And then again, educationally, is that a word? And career-wise, I would say that's all phenomenal, really good. And again, you're viewing it differently. And I think that that perspective is so important for us to hear you say, number one. And how do you, so you read a book, but how do you get to start, right? Obviously you've done way more than that at that point, but at this point, but how do you go from reading something to starting to actually live differently? Like, what's the difference between absorbing and realizing and then living authentically? What are the steps that you're taking?
Yeah, like it's not an intellectual practice. How do you integrate? I think one of the biggest gifts I got from my childhood is recognizing that life is fleeting, right? Like two gifts actually. One is that life was so not fun and not happy that the moment I had autonomy and freedom to live my way, I really wanted to live the best life I could, because I felt like finally my life is mine. I don't have to endure war or dysfunctional family or whatever it was. And the second gift is that because we were so isolated and not really part of society, and like I said, the gifts of my grandmother and my mother is that they always walked to the beat of their own drum.
Yeah.
I never felt social pressure to conform. I always felt like I can do whatever I want. It's my life. So that those two things were really helpful. It's the recognition that I own my destiny,
Okay.
and the deep gratitude and the awareness that I have one life, and that it's very short, it's very fleeting, and the chances of actually being here and living are so minuscule. And I'm here, like I already won the lottery ticket by being alive.
Yeah.
So I felt like everything else is just maximizing that chance of life.
Yeah. I totally get that.
You
100%. Yeah. What's the number one lesson that you've learned about life?
know? The number one lesson about life for me is the number one lesson today is that we're all a work in progress. Like,
Yeah.
as long as we are trying to be the best version of ourselves that we can, we're always going to be better than yesterday's version. And there's always a better version to look forward to tomorrow, So I really feel like if you just are able to live in this dual space of, I love myself and I'm perfect right now, and there is so much more to grow into and to become. It's a great duality to live with, because you're enjoying the moment and you're also still stretching into the future.
Yeah. What would you say to the people who are not necessarily doing one thing better every single day, but kind of taking a few steps back?
I would say it's normal. Like, give yourself some grace. We all, life is not this progression of constantly moving up. I've fallen back so many times, and I think it's like you go up and then you fall down and then you go up a little bit more, but then you fall a little bit less because you've learned some things, and it, it's really not linear. Like, life is messy and uncomfortable, and you take a few steps forward, then you slip down, and then you learn something that you didn't expect to learn, and now you're better equipped to take a few more steps forward. And learning, I think, just this awareness of what are you learning along the way. For example, for the longest time I thought I was extremely smart. And with that came the belief that I don't need help, I don't need anybody, because I'm smart, I can do this, I can figure this out, I'm independent, I'm resourceful. And that belief was so harmful, because we all need help, we all need support, we all need different perspectives and different experiences and different tools that help us grow. And it made me feel weak if I needed somebody. And I held on to this belief for so long. And I don't know when it clicked one day where I really felt I was just failing abysmally. And I'm like, maybe I'm not that smart. But it wasn't that. It's that nobody does things alone. The tree doesn't grow in a vacuum. It needs soil, and it needs sun, and it needs water, and it needs all those other things. And so just this humility that I learned, and reaching out and asking for help, because I love helping people, but I was like, I don't need help. I'm fine. Was so great. That's something I learned from falling back and, eating a nice big slice of humble pie a few times.
Yes, yes, yes. You talked a few times about the women, in your past and, being somewhat of a role model for you. What about the women who don't have a very good role model?
That's a good question. That's a very good question. And I think there are always role models out there. If it's not women in your family, it's women in your community. If it's not women, it's men who are supportive. If it's not men that it's maybe public figures. If it's not public figures, it's something as simple as a future version of yourself.
Yeah.
In the mind body skills groups that I run, we do an exercise that's a guided visualization, where you look for, in your imagination, you visualize and you look for a guiding existence. It could be a future version of yourself. It could be somebody in your ancestry. It could be somebody you know today. It could be an animal. It could be a symbol that is powerful to you, but it could be anything. And the power of that is that you are creating for yourself something that is uplifting and inspiring and motivating. So for me, always what comes to mind is a future version of myself, a better version, a version that is calmer and that's more patient and that has more balance in her life. And I aspire to be like that future version of me that I see in my mind.
Yeah.
For other people, it has been things like a tiger, because there are elements of a tiger that they admire, the strength, the beauty, the poise. And it can be something that changes each time. We are so resourceful.
Mm-hmm.
So reality is only a small part of the sources that we can draw on for strength and inspiration.
Definitely. Have you ever done that visualization with your kids?
That is a great question. I haven't. And now I want to do that.
What is your view on that? Because that's something that I'm asking this for, to be sort of greedy. What is your view on how much or when to kind of start educating your children on self-development? The issue that I have a 17-year-old son. My fiance has a 16-year-old son and a 14-year-old daughter. And, not trying to be rude, but there's like a shallowness there, with some children, not all children. So what's your view on that as far as kind of dipping them into that slowly and them actually being able to grasp?
I think ASAP. I also do the mind body skills groups for teens and youth.
Okay.
And what we do for the different age groups is we adjust the content to be accessible for those age groups.
Okay.
I do some of those. I run some of the exercises with my own kids at different levels, right? Like I would say, as soon as they are receptive enough for it to stick, you can start. My 11-year-old is very self-aware. She is very open and receptive to these exercises. So I do a lot of guided visualization of other things, not the best version, but I do, when she's feeling upset or angry and she doesn't know what she's feeling, we go in and we explore through visualization those emotions. I do autogenics, which is basically creating a message to your amygdala that you are not stressed, that you are relaxed, that there is no anxiety. And that's just a series of repeated messages you tell your body until your body believes it and relaxes. So they go to sleep that way. She's very receptive. My son on the other hand, who's only 1 year difference, he's 10, is very against it. Mom, you and your meditation mumbo jumbo. But then there are times where he's like, I can't sleep. And I offer, would you like us to try a little visualization? And he says, okay. And it works. And so I just reinforce and say, hey,
Beautiful.
remember yesterday how that was so helpful for you to sleep? Maybe we can try it again sometime. And just planting small seeds.
Beautiful. Yeah. I love that you have two and you're able to give that example, because I think that there is a difference in not only them being able to mentally absorb it, but just, the patience for it, to be able to sit and listen and kind of open up that part of their mind to, figuring out whether it's something that they could appreciate or not.
Absolutely. I have a 7-year-old also. And I really think even if we don't know these skills, or we're not equipped to give them to our kids, or we're not coaches, I think there are very small and simple places we can start with just helping them recognize what they're feeling.
Yeah.
Because again, as a leadership coach, one of the biggest challenges I have working with leaders and executives is that they don't know what they're feeling.
Yeah.
And self-awareness is not there. The ability to name and label an emotion is not there. I work with so many men who feel anger or depression, and that's it. The range of emotions they're able to recognize and name are tiny.
Yeah.
And we work on expanding that so that they can, if you can't recognize what you're feeling, you cannot change your behavior. Your emotions drive your behavior.
Yeah.
And your behavior drives your success, right?
Definitely. Yeah. Definitely.
So just starting with kids and saying, what are you feeling now? My daughter says, I don't know. I say, well, it looks to me like you're very frustrated. And she goes, yes, I'm frustrated. So I'm helping her find the words, right? I'm like, and I sense a little bit of anger. Are you angry? No, I'm not angry. I'm frustrated and I'm mad. And I'm like, okay, great. What's the difference between angry and mad? And she tells me in her mind, what's the difference? And so we have these conversations that help to, help her create this library of understanding.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do you ever use in your with your clients or your family a feelings chart?
I do. There's that. Do you know the one that's the circle that has the 6 basic emotions inside, and then it's got a second circle that has more nuanced emotions, and then the third one?
Ooh, I love that.
I will send you the link. It's so, so powerful.
Yes. So you can acknowledge one of the 6. Those are like the main ones, I assume, like happy, sad, angry.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then it breaks those down. So once you say I'm angry, it gives you like 5 more options of nuanced anger emotions.
Wow.
And then once you pick one, let's say, enraged, it breaks that one down further, and you're able to really pinpoint the emotion.
Beautiful. Speaking of anger, I've always been taught that anger is a hidden fear. Is that one of the emotions that shows up under angry, is fear?
I think so. Sometimes I think anger has a bad rap because
Thank you. I said the same thing. It's an emotion.
an emotion.
For a reason.
Sometimes it's not fear. Sometimes somebody's overstepping their boundaries and they're, violating your space. It could be your emotional space. Somebody offends you or insults you. It's okay to be angry. Yeah. But how you react to that anger and how you behave as a result is where the emotional intelligence comes in, right?
Yeah. Definitely. Oh, I love that. Yeah, send that link to me. That'd be great.
I will.
Yeah, I would appreciate that for sure. I kind of want to talk about belief systems. And I'm interested in knowing what was the most disempowering belief that you've had in your life, and then what do you believe now?
the most disempowering belief that I really had a hard time shaking was I'm not good enough, or I'm not enough. I'm not lovable enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not capable enough. I don't know enough. I'm not whatever not enough comes along with it, you know? And it took me a long time to shake that. What was really helpful for me in shifting that was, of course, first the awareness that that is one of my most deep-seated beliefs. But the second one was negating that belief by saying, not enough for who? Not enough for what? When is enough? What is enough? Because I spent so many years just collecting degrees thinking that that would make me enough. And then, you know, having more and more accomplishments, thinking that would be enough. And I never felt enough until I changed the narrative inside my head, right? Like, we are a work in progress. I said earlier, that's one of my strongest life lessons, biggest life lessons, is that we are all a work in progress. I'm enough for myself today. I'm enough for others today. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to stop. It doesn't mean that tomorrow I won't be more or different. But I can be okay with myself today.
Yeah.
And I really think my kids have been a big contribution in changing that belief, because if I'm never enough for myself, they're never going to be enough either. Right? So I'm constantly,
Yes.
I too high standards,
Yep.
you know, over demanding, all of those things that come along with a negative self-belief that I'm transmitting to them. And I really didn't want that. And I realized I was starting to do that.
Wow.
And
It's that self-awareness.
yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Well, you know, kids, the beautiful or horrible things about kids, depending on how you want to see it, is that they mirror to you who you are.
Yeah.
And so I would see behavior in my daughter that I had that I found shocking. You know,
That's great.
it's awful. She would repeat a sentence that I would say, and I'd be like, "Oh, that sounds horrible coming." I can't say that anymore. And they mirror to you like all of your broken and disconnected beliefs and thoughts. And I just find kids such a great education.
Yeah, agree. Agree 100%. I definitely know that, you know, the having children, I have my son, but it's definitely been a learning experience. And I'm so grateful that I found and decided to embrace personal development. I think it's so important to take that step. I think a lot of times individuals think that after high school or after college, you know, then that's it. They never open up any book or try to learn anything else ever again. And they're really doing themselves a disservice and their lineage a disservice. I want to ask, you know, you mentioned enough, and what is your take on knowing you're enough, but then also being willing to learn more? You know, because if I would have said I'm enough at the age of 25, you know, right when I was getting into personal development, why would I have ever taken the step to learn anything more? So what is the little balance that we have to have between feeling good but then also striving for better?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think it relates very much to the self-awareness again. Part of what I do in my coaching is I do an emotional intelligence assessment. And what I have found is that people with very low self-awareness have also spent very little time in introspection and in personal development. I think when we're not aware of what we're feeling or where we are or how the world is reacting to us, we have less incentive to change, to evolve, to look inwards and to improve. The other thing you had asked me about anger and fear earlier is that I think there are two kinds of people. I think there are some people who are more driven by fear, and some people who are more driven by pain. Let me see how to put this. So there's fear and there's pain, and some people are more averse to fear. Some people are more averse to pain. Introspection and personal development is painful. And so if you have an appetite for pain, if you can overcome it, you go towards that, you will develop yourself, right? Like if you're able to do the pain part. If you're more likely to stay in the fear space and not go into the pain space, then you keep away from self-development because you don't want to be in the pain space. You're more comfortable being in fear. It's a
Wow,
straight.
that's so interesting because I view those very much the same, but they're not the same.
I don't think so. I've given it a lot of.
To be fearful of something and then to feel pain from something. Wow. Okay.
So I take myself as an example. I don't mind pain because I always know it's temporary. And so I'm very willing to do things that might appear painful, like introspection, like, getting jabbed with a needle, like whatever it is. I don't like living in fear because fear disempowers me. Some people are more comfortable with fear, living in chronic fear, because pain is something they're very, very averse to.
So, how can you switch?
Well, you have to make the fear more uncomfortable, and you have to lower the perception of pain. Pain is a perception to a very big extent. Yeah. Most of us we're more afraid of the imminent pain than of the pain itself.
Yeah, your perception of the pain.
Yeah, like you see, let's say you want to get a shot, you see the needle coming towards you, you're afraid of that needle. But when it actually sticks you, you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. It's not the event, it's the anticipation of the event.
Yeah. And so I hate needles every single time. I make a huge deal about it. I mean, not for a huge deal for me. I'm not like that dramatic, but I'm all like, do you have a ball I can squeeze? Is there a teddy bear? Like I say stuff like that, and I'm like, I'm like white knuckling my purse and yeah, it's never even that big of a deal. It's so crazy. But the entire time, from the moment they're about to stick me until they take the needle out, so they have to take like a few vials, the whole time I'm literally like clenching for dear life. And it's hilarious. Like ever after, I just went through this whole thing because I broke my leg 2020 October. Yeah, just literally snapped it in half. And so going into surgery was a whole thing with needles. Not a lot because they like do it through one predominantly, but then there was a couple others to like numb my legs and stuff, or my leg. And then I had to go back to I had to get metal in to fix it. And then I had to go back and get all the metal out once it was fixed. So I had to do it twice. And then all the appointments I had to do leading up to the second surgery to like check all my vitals. I had some issues with my blood and some issues with my heart rate and all this stuff. So I had to like keep going back to like get Dr. okays, to do whatever. But it was like so much and I'm doing personal development. This is like my arena of doing all the things. But for some reason, this silly little needle, and it's frustrating to me because I know like it's not even when it's done, literally everything's fine. Like it's not even that big of an issue. But I do all the things. I'm like talking to myself. I'm trying to like internalize and it still frightens me so much.
Do you think it's because you're focused on the fear? Because I find when you focus on the afterwards, right? Like if you focus on the reward, when I'm done, it's not going to be anything, it's going to be fine. This is going to be over soon. The sooner I start, the sooner I end. I always find that if you focus on the reward or the aftermath or the end result, that you're trying to accomplish, it makes it so much easier. What they say, right? What you
I
focus
haven't done that, so I'll have to do that next time. I'm gonna write that down because I have not done that. I have not thought about the happiness after, and that it's not that big of a deal.
that's what gets me through so many hard things, like, running, going for a 5K run. Sometimes it's just really hard. Sometimes I'm tired,
Okay.
not in the mood, but I always think, okay, I chunk it down. I'm just gonna do 1 more kilometer, and I'm gonna feel so good. I remember that feeling, like I really work on my memory. I remember how good it feels to, when I finish running, the endorphins and all of that, and I feel fit. And so I'm just going to do 1 more. And then I do that 1 more and I'm like, well, I'm already at 3. I'm just going to do 1 more and then I'll quit. So I always give myself
Yeah.
choice, the options to opt out. And I focus on when I'm done, I'm going to feel so good. I
Yeah.
do 5K, but I like lie to myself to get there.
Yes, yes, yes. That makes sense. I can appreciate that. So, fear versus pain. Is there anything else besides that?
Um, Remind me of your question again.
Well, that's okay. There was no question. We were talking about people doing things and personal development
Oh, right, right.
and how depending on which you are, um,
Yeah,
some people will be more prone to get into personal development than other people. So,
yeah.
people who view life more painful or more fearful, one is more and then I asked, which is where we ended. We did have a question, you're right. Can you switch?
I think you can. So I use my clients as a benchmark to understand, and I think some of them come when some of them come to me when there's no option anymore, right? Like they have been backed into a corner, and avoiding personal development is no longer a choice. They have to. It's either that or get fired. It's either personal development or get a divorce. It's either personal development or something. Like they get to a point where they know that this is the only next choice they have to make.
Got it.
And other people are more self-aware. They feel like, okay, I'm not really where I want to be. I need to improve my life and I'm going to go do it now. So it's a matter of timing, but I really think everybody gets to it sooner or later. I know people in their 70s and 80s who only now are getting into personal development because they want to be able to feel that their life was a life well lived or a life that was worth living. They want to have some sort of um, packaging or wrapping that makes sense around their life. And you can't do that without introspection, right? You can't
Yeah,
without understanding what drove your choices and why you did what you did and what it meant, or find the meaning for it.
definitely. Definitely. So I kind of want to talk about what you do. You've shared so much information with us. There are a ton of people online right now, obviously interested in you, your story, and what you have to offer. Can you tell us what you do and how you help the humans?
Yeah, it's my favorite thing. I run a coaching company. It's called Audacity Activated because I feel like we all have audacity inside of us that just needs to be turned on. So I'm an executive leadership and life coach. And I work on 3 big areas of people. I help in building skills, leadership skills, creativity skills. I'm a certified creativity coach. I'm a certified life and executive coach. Um, I do emotional intelligence assessments, and then I help people build up their emotional intelligence so that they can be better leaders. And and I help people change behavior through emotional intelligence because, again, the 4 steps of emotional intelligence are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and then social management. And if you are able to do those, you're much more likely to be successful. So high IQ, there is no correlation with success. High emotional intelligence, very strong correlation with success. It's so simple. It's a simple formula. And this is where I said I thought I was so smart until I discovered, emotional intelligence. And then I help people build self-awareness through mind-body skills. So I'm very passionate about mind-body skills because it builds self-awareness. I'm very passionate about emotional intelligence because it helps to create better leaders, better humans. And I'm very passionate about creativity because it helps to build up our skills of divergent thinking and of transforming the unique parts of who we are into something that we want to share with the world, something meaningful.
Absolutely. Audacity activated. I love that. I love that. And her website is above her face area for anyone who wanted to check out. Is all your social media on there so they can click and follow you? Okay.
It is.
Very cool. Very cool. What does success mean to you?
Loving yourself and loving the life that you've created. So yeah, I think when you're successful, it has to be your own definition, not society's definition. And you have to feel good about the person that you are creating, because you're creating yourself every day by the actions you take and the choices you make. And building a life that is meaningful. You know, for me, success is three things that I have tattooed on my body. It's having freedom of choice. It's loving people around me and supporting my family, my society, my community. And it's the ability to be creative and to write, to make art, to, you know, put a part of myself into the world.
100%. This Facebook guest says, thank you for sharing. I read Kat's bio and it was what really made me want to attend today.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
I really appreciate all that you do. It's just such important work to be able to share the stories of women out there and to continue to have our voices heard so that we can inspire and motivate the next generation and everyone who needs a little boost.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of want to touch, before we, start to close up here, we kind of touched on this a little bit in the beginning of our podcast, but females and everyone, deals with this, and I like to notate that every once in a while. I'm not naive to the fact that all humans, get tied up in certain areas of their life. But for the females out there who are struggling to really figure out who they are or what they are, and to be their authentic selves, what would be your advice as far as speaking to a woman right now who's just really struggling with herself?
With herself, like
being who she's supposed to be.
Yeah. I'm a big advocate for making mental space to be with yourself. A lot of times we're so busy and so stressed and we're on the treadmill that we have no time to get to know ourselves. So if you can't travel, go on a date by yourself, sit in a cafe, see what makes you feel uncomfortable. Just get to know, start being curious about what piques your interest. I gave a TED Talk once on the power of distraction, and that's what got me started. It's those little distractions that catch your attention, that are calling to you and telling you what you're interested in, who you are, what matters to you. When you're walking down the street, what do you notice? Who do you notice? Do you notice the person sitting on the side, or do you notice the car? Or, when you're at work, what is it that angers you? Is it the injustice? Is it the lack of connection? All of these things, like every moment we are living informs us more about who we are, about what matters to us, about what we care about. And then you have to have a place to put it, right? Like the reason that I wrote so much is it was a great way to gather all of this information into a space and then to make sense of it. So either talk to somebody about it, what I'm discovering about myself, or write it down. Who am I? Every day, like ask yourself, who am I? You might start by saying, I'm a woman and I'm struggling with this, but I found something that I wrote 10 years ago about who am I? And,
You found something?
Yeah, I was looking through my files and I found I had written 10 years ago, who am I?
That's the best. I love that. So cool.
Yeah, and just start like, who am I? And answer that question. And then the next question is, what matters to me? What do I want? Like, it might be a house, it might be, abundance, it might be, a relationship, but go deeper than that. What do I want? I want money, right? Like, I started my business to make money, but what I want is not money. What I want is the freedom that money gives me, right? Like, I have a family. Why did I want a family? Because I want the love and connection that brings to me.
Yeah.
Like, when we understand who we are and what we want, that's the biggest part of the equation. We understand who we are, that's point A, and we understand what we want, that's point B. And then the only challenge is figuring out the shortest distance between the two.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. And I do think, I love that you're saying this, because I do think one of the biggest issues that we struggle with is knowing what we want. We don't even know. I ask people, well, what are you trying to do? What do you want? They have no idea.
Yeah. And that's why the values exercise is so helpful. As a coach, I'm sure you know that, but like, what are your values? What matters to you? Because those are the things that we use to make choices. And if we are living in line with our values, we feel good and we feel happy. And if we're not, then no amount of things that we collect or, jobs that we get are going to make us feel happy.
Yeah. So what do you want and why do you want it? I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who are you? What do you want? Why do you want it?
Absolutely. That's so good. Thank you so much. I so appreciate you taking some time out of your day to sit down with us and share your journey and really just kind of open up, as far as the things that you've learned along the way. I think that I learned some awesome stuff during this. I appreciate you. Do you have any closing thoughts before I close up here?
It's been my pleasure. And the only thing I will say is that the more you look inwards, the better an outer world you can create.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Kat. I so appreciate you. And for those of you, everyone that's still hanging on past an hour, we so appreciate you spending time with us, supporting us. Anyone who is interested in learning more about Kat, her website is in her box area there, audacityactivated.com. All of her social media and links and all of that stuff is also on that website. So thank you so much for joining us here on Her Version. This community is expanding every single day and is filled with females who are striving to do better than they did yesterday. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you follow, like, and share. If you have an amazing story to share, make sure you reach out to me at herversion.life or just direct message me. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria, and I'm so grateful to be here sharing a platform that allows people to share their truth and inspire others.